Welcome to Man in the Sands Pub, continuing with Series 2, Episode 3, the festive theme of peaty, smoky whiskey. So if we recall, Episode 1 and Episode 2 of Series 2, we reviewed and tasted the Enoch and the Port Charlotte 10. Now, they were 40 ppm. If you recall, that's the fennel, the smoky element, parts per million. Well, today we're tasting another Bruichladdich, which also owns Port Charlotte, a beast, an Octomore 9.1 series. Why is it a beast? Well, if we go back through the legacy of Bruichladdich, of experimentation and believing that mature and aged doesn't mean better, the then head blender, Jim McEwen, looked at taking the Port Charlotte and continuing the slow distillation process that Bruichladdich is famed for, and smoking that Port Charlotte for much longer. The result at that time was the first Octomore, resulting in 131, that's 131 ppm. Just by its definition of having 131 of parts per million of fennel in it, it was the peatiest whiskey in the world. And so the Octomore was born, and there have been generations of the Octomore. And what's important to realise is, whilst Jim McEwen was there at the time, the head distiller has changed. So today we have Adam Hannett, and Adam is responsible for deciding when the whiskies are ready to be released, and in so doing, influencing with his own human touch the whiskies that we're tasting, including this one today. This is under Adam, and it is one of 42,000. No more than that, 42,000, and we are trying one today. Before I get into the whiskey, I just want to touch on Bruichladdich a bit, because we've tasted the Bruichladdich, the classic laddie. We've tasted the Port Charlotte 10 only in the last episode, and which again is owned by Bruichladdich. And here we're seeing the evolution from the Port Charlotte years ago to the Octomore and the generation of Octomore we have today, again owned by Bruichladdich. And you know, one of my key aspects of whiskey is reinvesting into the elements around one, protecting nature. So a couple of points without getting into all of what they do in Bruichladdich. Firstly, the packaging. Isn't this gorgeous? Absolutely gorgeous. And also the bottle. Just look at this. Beautiful. Something special. Different. 100% recycled. All of their packaging and bottles, 100% recycled. And they've also focused on energy consumption and moved to 100% renewable energy with a long-term focus to tidal and hydropower, which is fantastic. And so they should. But the fact is, they are doing it. So what about the whiskey that we have here today, created all those years ago in essence to form a legacy to the evolution of what we're tasting today? So I am doing this for you. The ppm is an astounding 156 ppm. Now, I talk about Mike Tyson and a punch, but that's like George Foreman. I'm the punch bag. It's not going back into shape. I'm just dented for life. So 156 ppm. And what more could you do to challenge me? Let's talk about the alcohol volume. 59.1. Now that's serious. And so immediately one would think of similar to cask strength, that the Padre is going to win this. But if you remember, the Bruichladdich, the classic laddie, whilst not peaty, but was 50%, that wasn't the case. So what's going to happen here today? And I'm fascinated to find out with you on our journey, because it's certainly quite an imposing whiskey in its elements and by its statistics. So on that note, let's crack on. So what do we have here in front of us? Obviously the mistress is always with us, the Padre. Now I'm following suit, backed by the greater interest level when the Padre is not added in advance to give a 10-minute absorption and integration with the whiskey. So let's add the Padre now. The whiskey is already in there. We have the ice, we have neat and naked as nature intended, and so, oof, lovely. Let's crack on. I was just then getting a nose of it, a little cheeky by me, but as I was pouring them out, I was bringing a bit of that nose in, and I can't wait. So on that note, 156 ppm, 59.1% volume. This beauty was distilled in 2012 and then aged for 5 years in ex-American whiskey with an E, casks, predominantly Jim Beam as well as Jack Daniels and a couple of others. Again, remember, Bruichladdich, and going back to Jim McEwen, had this concept that we should dispense with the notion that aged or matured is better. Why can't we have a whiskey that hits all the relevant notes and delivers something fantastic without having to be defined by a 25-year, etc.? So this is interesting, and I love the way that they've really brought it into their own, and it certainly has a human touch and human element. So, without further ado, hats off, game on. Excellent. Little bit wary, won't lie to you. So let's begin with the naked as nature intended. Now the first thing I want to do is take an opportunity, because it's unchilled and it's natural coloured. I don't know if you can see that in the light, but I'm tilting it a bit, and if you're like me, see that? You see it moves like a tidal wave together. There's no splashing, there's no separation. It seems to have a heavier body, and I wonder if that's because of the ppm and the way it's been put together, but it certainly comes across as a lovely golden hue, but thick density to it. Makes it interesting already for me. Now, nosing, I'm going to go in coyly, just as if I'm seeing a young lady from afar, or whatever your preference may be, and thinking, I just want to have a little nose around without making myself too obvious or tripping up along the way and making a fool of myself. So remember, this is very delicate. This is a high percentage. Be gentle with yourself. Well, interesting, immediately the high percentage doesn't hit me as I thought it would. And it's sweet. It certainly is a toffee sweetness to it. Caramelization almost. Now let's just see what happens when I tilt and bring back to see if it brings up anything heavier. Yes, it does. It does. It brings out more of the alcoholic volume into the nostrils, although I was inhaling deeply. But it certainly does bring something out a bit more, and I want to say fruit. It seems to have a fruity, not too hard on a citrus, not like a lemon zest, but more of a winter fruits. You know, if you'd like, say, the apricot to cherry type of fruit, just hitting your nose lightly. Okay. Sláinte. Wow. Oh, immediately the front of the mouth, fizzing away, but attacking. It's attacking the front of the lips, like I've popped a chili and lined it across the lips. And yet, the middle to back of the mouth, heavenly. Definitely can sense it's a higher alcohol percentage, but not to a negative effect. To a surprising, it's light. And as you breathed in, it hasn't burned, and I thought it would. It certainly isn't like fuel, and I thought it might be. If anything, I think I could run a marathon now. It has opened up the lungs. Deep breathing. Amazing. And again, as I'm breathing in, the lips are starting to subside now. The beginning of the tongue, the fieriness is starting to subside. And I'm getting through a few more tasting notes. Now I'm going to go back in before I tell you what I think. It's a marvel. 59.1%, 156 ppm, and boom, floating through, complex, subtle. It is heavy, but surprisingly smooth. Again, at the back and when you go down, which is where it counts, let's be honest. But in the mouth, whilst it's fizzing, here there's a little bit of jingle bells going on. Jingle bells, you know, it's up and down, it's floating around. Custard comes to mind. I'm going to say brown sugar, custard. I'm almost coming up with the Portuguese little pudding, aren't I? The natas. So there's custard, there's brown sugar. I want to say marzipan, I may be misplaced there, but definitely apricot. And grape. It has a freshness of a grape. White grape, just to be clear. Wow, wow, wow. We weren't expecting that, were we? Now it is punchy, but gosh, it's delightful, and I'm going to come back to it. But let's carry on with the tasting. The Padre. Well, it certainly takes the edge off, doesn't it? As you'd expect. But it doesn't give you that opening. It hangs more here. It doesn't go deep down. And I prefer it going deep down. It had such a wonderful effect. A bit of titillation, if you like. Now, hanging here, you taste more of the saline, if that brings that out. A bit more of the citrus, more sharpness. And I'm not sure if I prefer that. I'm just going to go back in. It's incredibly smooth with it, but the difference, when it's naked, she goes back and lies with you at the back of the throat and soothes you and makes you want more. It's an adrenaline rush. Whilst almost giving you a slap on the lips, cheeky, with a hug afterwards, stroking you, but I still love you. With water, you don't get that. You get a bit more of it's smoother with a kiss, but the nails dig in a bit, because what you're getting is a harshness at the back you don't get with this. So isn't that strange? Smoother, but when it gets to the back of the throat, a bit harsher. I mean, it's just hanging here for me. Not sure I like that. Let's move on to the ice. Oh, another game changer. I don't prefer it, just so you know. But it seems the concentration of water and perhaps the coldness, and again, I don't know if you can see this, but you know, it's unchill filtered. Natural colour. You can see that fogging up. It makes it more medicinal, in my opinion, with the ice. I'm not saying it tastes medicinal, but it has that harshness. I don't like it, so listen. Adios, amigo. Gone. So now we're left with these two. I'm going to tell you straight. This is lovely with the Padre, but not sophisticated with the Padre. So for me, whilst it almost brought out, I want to say, remember when I was talking about marzipan and custard and apricots, all very subtle, by the way. They tastes start to come afterwards. This has more of a walnut in it, and a bit of a sharpness that I don't prefer against the winner. Neat and naked as nature intended. Now, it's a sophisticated whiskey. It's a George Foreman punchy whiskey. But my goodness, and I'm just going to go in again, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to close with. It's winter. You're in a building in a remote part of a countryside or island. There's a fire roaring. There's a hearth, and outside the elements are whipping by. There's you, there's this, and there's a partner snuggling up next to you. Romance and wild nights will be fiery for you with this on a winter's evening. And that is why I rate this heavily. This is for one of those novels of raunchiness. And on that note, thank you for joining me on this journey. If you like this, and I hope you do, please click like, share with everyone that you think would enjoy this. Subscribe if you haven't. I'd really welcome increasing the subscription. And that in turn, I'd love to have your comments. So thank you, look after yourselves, festive frolics to you all. And until the next time, which will be a Christmas special, I can't wait to join you. Thanks again. Take care.